This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Can Bryce Underwood be fixed in time for the game? Let's discuss that next on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Tip. Caught.
They said you can't beat Ohio State. Now what?
Brady gets terrific. Throws it. Get it. Touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. So we are in, as Sharon Moore likes to say, the third quarter of the season. And the next 2 weeks have two goals. One, win the game. To quote the great prophet Herm Edwards, you play to win the game. But you also have a second goal. We got to fix Bryce Underwood. Because I think it's pretty apparent right now he's a little bit broken. And I know I said on here, a couple of weeks ago against Michigan State, don't panic. It's a rivalry game. But like I said on here last week, then we saw the same thing against Purdue, not a rivalry game. And it was the same MO. The game plan was to put the game more in Bryce's hands. The game plan was to sling the ball around the field. I think the fan tropes are wrong, which is usually the case. Not always, but usually. I mean, they're trying. They want to be throwing the ball more around the yard. They are trying to do this. He just can't execute it right now. And there's a myriad of issues. How well is he seeing the field? Is he seeing ghosts? How much are his eyes on the rush and not down the field? You'll get a great breakdown of that stuff from Devin Gardner and Jake Butt's outstanding podcast. And frankly, after I listened to that myself, I kind of thought, well, two things. One, we need Bryce to mature emotionally a lot during the bye. And we need one of the best weeks of quarterback development during the bye in the history of the Michigan program. Because he's in control of what the next 3 weeks look like. He's in control of whether we're sitting around waiting for a playoff spot or if we're wondering what meaningless bowl game we're going to be playing in again this year. I mean, this really is on him. He single-handedly is the ceiling of this team. In fact, let me demonstrate a couple of things to you with some data. All right, here's fact number one. Total games that Michigan had more than 400 yards of total offense in 2024, just one in 13 games. Already in 9 games this season, Michigan already has 4. It would be 5, except they took a bunch of knees at the end against Purdue and I think ended up with like 398 instead. All right. So what you're seeing there, systemic improvement of the offense. It's still not great, but it's competent. At times it's even good. All right. So the offense has taken a step forward, especially when you consider that our best running back right now, our 2 best running backs all season, didn't carry the ball once during the regular season last year. Neither Justice Haynes wasn't here, and Jordan Marshall was hurt most of last year until the bowl game. Secondly, we have been starting at least 3 new players in the offensive line for every game this year. Now, the names are different. Sometimes the names are Nathan Afobe, and sometimes the names are Blake Frazier, and sometimes, the names change, Jake Quinera. The names have been different, but we have been starting 3 new players in the offensive line all year. So the top 2 running backs, not here last year. Top 2 receivers, Andrew Marsh, Donovan McCulley, not here last year. 3 new starters in the offensive line, and yet you are seeing systemic improvement on the offense. Here's what you're not seeing. Systemic improvement at the quarterback position. I mean, it looks prettier, but when you boil down the stats, take a look at this. All right, through 9 games in 2024. All right, through 9 games in 2024, Michigan had 64% completions, 9 touchdowns, Michigan quarterbacks. So we're talking both Orji and Davis Warren, and Jake Tuttle will be in there as well. 9 total touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 1,199 yards. Bryce Underwood through 9 games this year, 62% completion, so roughly the same. 7 total touchdowns. That should be 3 total interceptions, 1,440 yards. So very, very modest improvement at quarterback. And yet we've made systemic improvements overall on offense. So what that tells you is the floor is higher, but Bryce Underwood's going to determine what the ceiling is here. Now, what could he show us the next 2 weeks that would demonstrate he's taken a step forward and he's ready now for the game, as much as you can get ready without ever having played in it before? Well, I think you have to look at his best game. I think you got to look at the Washington game. That was his best game. That's the best game a Michigan quarterback has played here since J.J. McCarthy. And that would be up there with some of J.J.'s very best games. What did we see in that game? We saw ample use of the tight ends, which, given the way we run the football, there should be a correlation there. All right. That's a case where causation should be about, correlation. And then secondly, that he's doing things within the flow of the offense. I would bet that you would see more plays from the pocket against Washington than any other game we played against a meaningful opponent this year, because we can probably win the next 2 games with a good running game. And if Bryce just kind of does stuff on a couple of plays for big plays, but you can't just kind of do stuff against Ohio State. All right. You got to run the offense. So if you look at that Washington game, it's not a coincidence. The most ample use of the tight ends, and also the most success looking through the progressions, running the system, running the offense from within the pocket. So I think that is what we are looking for over the next 2 weeks. It's very difficult. You're no longer, playing high school kids and just getting out of the pocket and running outside and beating them to the spot. Very hard to do that, right? You have to learn how to make plays in the pocket. I think that's what we are looking for the next 2 weeks to see if Bryce is truly ready to take on the game. Folks, the best way to support us here at Michigan Podcast is to do so via our Patreon page, patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. We are posting picks there year round, whether it's Major League Baseball, whether it's college basketball, whether it's the NFL, and of course, college football. Our win total best bets, you would have gotten those, for example, before the market moved. About half the books in the last few days moved on Texas under 10.5 down to 9.5. If you were following us on Patreon when we posted that, you would have gotten that before that number moved, right? So we give you all kinds of great data and picks, PGA major picks as well. We've cashed 8 of the last 11 majors in professional golf. So if you want to support us on our Patreon page, it's just $10 a month there at patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. That's right, just $10 a month. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. That's patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. And thank you so very much if you're one of our supporters already. Well, let's ask Mark Rogers the question we just discussed amongst ourselves here at the top of this week's show, because the ceiling of what remains of this season and the chances Michigan has in the game against Ohio State largely rest on this question, which is, how much more can Bryce Underwood be developed? How much more is sitting there in the tank for Bryce Underwood? Can he be fixed in time for the game? And Mark, I talked today and then after the Purdue game, to me, Michigan State rivalry games, you know this, over the last few years, as good as anybody on the wrong side of the rivalry. Rivalry games are a season unto themselves, and strange, quirky kinds of things can happen. So I really wasn't all that alerted that Bryce basically blanked on the road in East Lansing. Michigan found a running game, got out of there with a win. Just survive and get the hell out of your opponent's stadium when it's a rivalry game, right? But when you turn right around, though, and you see the same thing, same exact game against Purdue, it was clear Michigan wanted to give the game plan to Bryce Underwood. It is clear Michigan's intent was to let it rip, and he couldn't do it. And they then had to say, okay, we got to win the game. So, Jordan Marshall as, a young version of Hassan Haskins, here you go. Take the game over, and he did. That's great to have that. But, we're probably not beating Ohio State with that. And I know I'm going to get 100 comments. We didn't even have a quarterback last year and beat them. I get that. You just can't count on that every time out, right? So your thoughts on the question of the moment. Can Bryce Underwood be fixed in time for the game?
First of all, Steve, when it comes to rivalry games, I think that's going to be a great off-season discussion that two of us can possibly have at some point. But we'll shelve that for the off-season in regards to whether you can throw out the records during rivalry week. So I saw your setup, did not see what you had to say, but saw the email that, of course, that you sent to me to prepare myself for the show. And I thought, okay, Bryce Underwood, can he improve by the game? Yes, he can improve. Can Michigan improve him? I don't know if I trust the Michigan coaching staff. And of course, Chip Lindsey would be the guy that would have a primary role in all of that. Chip Lindsey's got a pretty decent track record of working with top-level quarterbacks over the last 10 years in college football. Drake May, Dylan Gabriel. Mm-hmm. I know we don't really think fondly on the tenure of Jarrett Stidham, but he did take Auburn to an SEC championship game. The thing that just popped into my head as you were setting us up here just a few seconds ago is football's an attrition sport. It's an activity in attrition as we go through the season. We do not think of the quarterback position as being a physical position, a physically demanding position. But it's still a grind for a guy who has only played high school football to now be thrown in against Oklahoma and a 9-game Big Ten schedule and to go through the rigors of that physically. And then also, of course, the mental capacity and the workload that's placed on the quarterback position of dealing with the offense, the leadership, and everything that's been, even though he's been cast as one of a kind, generational. And that very well may be. This is a lot for a true freshman to take on. And I think it's the wear and tear of the season, number one. I also, again, I don't have a huge trust in Michigan's development of a passing game around any quarterback, let alone Bryce Underwood. So that's what I'm trying to process here. But I think he's fully capable of taking the instruction based on what I know of him. And I think the positive of this, or the ceiling of this, is obviously his ceiling. That's the hope, is that he has such an enormous ceiling. If they can take advantage of them and just get him to play consistent football for his 15 to 20 dropbacks and then see him be special for 3 to 5. And sure, he's going to make a couple of mistakes. He's not going to be perfect, but of course, limit the mistakes. And then hopefully he can get back to where he was during the mid portion of the season, where he was giving us 3 or 4 plays of, oh yeah, that's the guy.
So you mentioned improvement. A couple of graphics I pointed out at the top of the show I want to get your take on. Here's number one. Pardon me. Total games last year that Michigan had more than 400 yards of total offense. All of last year, 13 games. One time against Arkansas State. So we're through 9 games this year. Michigan has hit 400 yards of total offense 4 times. It would have been 5 last week again, or 2 weeks ago against Purdue, but they kneeled out. So they ended up with about 398. So systemically, especially when you're talking about the fact we have, for the better part of this season, been starting 3 first-time guys in the offensive line. The names have been different. Some weeks it's Nathan Afobe. Some weeks it's Blake Frazier. Some weeks it's Jake Guinera. All right. But it's pretty much been 3 first-time starters on the offensive line from the very beginning of the year. So there are some signs of some market improvement there, at least on a systemic level, Mark.
Yeah, and this Northwestern team is no joke. I watched the game against USC. I had not seen Northwestern really play this year, maybe a couple plays here, a couple drives here and there, but I did watch the entire game against USC. And maybe they'll be giving lessons to their number 95 defensive end to not pretend to be Michael Vick as he's taking a possible pick six into the end zone, because that really turned the game around. They had the chance to tie the game, and it turned into a 2-possession game because they turned a touchdown for them into a USC touchdown. But obviously, it is the Northwestern that we know Northwestern to be. They are at a huge disadvantage athletically, but they are an extremely tough, determined football team, and they have some really good players on all 3 levels on the defensive side. So to see Bryce Underwood improve, we've looked at his ceiling, his ability, what he's shown us thus far. Then we've analyzed at least touched upon the coaching aspect of this. But does he have the playmakers? See, USC only won that game against Northwestern, and forget the final score because it was a 1-possession game well into the 4th quarter. They won that game because they were just so much better athletically on the outside that they made Northwestern just look slow in space. But otherwise, it was a very hotly contested game. And I don't know that Michigan can do that in space against Northwestern. Now, I'm not calling for the upset, but I'm just saying that, that they have some work to do, obviously. And I don't know if they've got the tools in the passing game to do it.
So I've sat in the same seats at Michigan Stadium for the last 4 seasons. And the teams I've seen Michigan play are Nebraska when they were terrible in 22, Purdue when they were terrible in 23, Minnesota when they were okay in 24, and Purdue when they were terrible in 25. By far, this was the most guys schemed open I've ever seen. By far, this was the most layered and diverse route tree I've ever seen. By far, there were the most plays to be made down the field than I've ever seen. I mean, the sophistication of this passing game in terms of its scheme and concepts is light years ahead of what Michigan was doing the last few years of Harbaugh and the first year of Sharon. So it really, to me, is that this is also why I think this is why I did these 2 graphics in this order. So let's go to the second graphic here. And if you go to the second one, right? So we just documented overall systemic improvement of the Michigan offense. But let's look just at the quarterback position for a second here, Mark. If you just look at the quarterback position, Michigan quarterbacks through 9 games in 2024, 64% completions, 9 total touchdowns, rushing and passing, 7 interceptions, 1,199 yards. Bryce Underwood through 9 games this year, 62% completions, roughly the same. 7 total touchdowns, should be actually 3 interceptions, 1,440 yards. So if you look at the overall systemic improvement of the offense, and then you look at his numbers compared to the Michigan quarterbacks through 9 games a year ago, essentially his progress is lagging behind the overall progress of the offense when you just look at those 2 numbers back to back, in my view.
And that's shocking that you put Alex Orji into that mix, because obviously we don't want to be comparing, as Michigan fans, I'm sure, don't want to be comparing Bryce Underwood to Davis Warren. But At least Davis Warren at one point in the season showed, okay, at his best, he could run a functional offense. Of course, Alex Orji never could run a balanced offense because he was just inept as a passer. So to make that comparison of the overall numbers of basically Davis Warren and Alex Orji combined versus Bryce Underwood, hey, I can't argue with the numbers. I can only argue with what I see on the screen when I watch this team from week to week. And again, save for the last 2 weeks, I thought Bryce Underwood was showing improvement and showing a ceiling 3 to 4 times a game that obviously those other guys could not touch.
So tell me about what it looks like, you think, if in 3 weeks we decide with you guys we're going to try to turn Jordan Marshall and into Hassan Haskins and try to win that way. And if you recall that game, I think there was 1 big downfield play action throw that JJ made and 1 big downfield play action throw I think that Cade made in that game in 21. So enough that there was, taking advantage of ganging up on the running game. Now, I think this Ohio State defense is better than that one. I think this Michigan offense is not as good as that one. So what do you think of Michigan essentially saying, we think we can win this game 24-20. And the reality is, if it requires more points to win this game, we can't win it anyway. So like I had Connor Stallions tell me a few days ago that you hate seeing either running back get hurt. But if he was going to pick one running back to ride against Ohio State, it would actually be Jordan Marshall, because he's the more physical running back. He's the more consistent gainer. He's the guy that plays more our style of ball, complementary football, time of possession, grind you down. And Justice Haynes is your classic home run threat, 2 yards, 2 yards, 2 yards, 50 yards, right? Okay. So he's kind of more of a Travion Henderson, type, frankly. They're very similar in that vein. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think sometimes the best way is the most obvious way, and this is the case here. And that's exactly where I was headed if I was going to be asked about Michigan's path to victory in this game, and it seems so tried and true. However, I think that we'll start with Jordan Marshall. Okay, that seems to be a reasonable assessment of those two guys. You would want to have both of them, meaning Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall, but you've got Marshall, and even though he's coming into his first full season, he's the more physical back, and obviously he's fresh. He's been little used most of the season, so he should be ready to roll against the Buckeyes in a couple weeks if he stays healthy. That I have never seen Ohio State get pushed around defensively along the front like they did in that game. They rarely got fooled in that game. It wasn't like earlier in that season, 2021, they played a game against Oregon where they gave up. They got gashed just as much as they did against Michigan, but in a much different way. They couldn't contain the edge. They got fooled by misdirection constantly. And there were defenders not even in the picture with Oregon running backs in open space. Mm-hmm. Against Michigan, no, guys were in position. Guys, the plays were not fooling Ohio State for the most part. They were just getting pushed 3 and 4 yards off the line of scrimmage. They were on skates that entire day. I don't see this defensive line being manhandled by a less talented offensive line, less sturdy offensive line. And this defensive front, though not spectacular, doesn't have the names that last year's did, is just playing lights out. This defense is so good. It is so good. But Ohio State does not have a running game. And if we get that weather situation that we had a couple of years ago and seem to get in Ann Arbor, and that's not an excuse, you got to play football in weather, Gene Smith. So I hate that. I think that was brought up on my Buckeye show just a couple of weeks ago about, like, in a positive light about moving games inside for Ohio State. It's just deplorable. You were like, the ghost of Woody Hayes is going to find you and beat you, and you'll thank him for it later. That's what you were like. Yes. And I have no issue with discussing which team you could go back to 1980 and say, well, it favors Michigan because Ohio State's got Art Schlechter. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with having the discussion of who it favors, but to make excuses and want to play indoors, a game that's made to be played outdoors. And as my father once, you should appreciate this, he took me to my first NFL game in 1978 so I could see Fran Tarkington when I was just a little tyke at the Silver Dome and drove through a blizzard. And my dad, growing up in the 30s and 40s, it's like we're playing football in our living room. It's 72 degrees in here. What's going on? So absolutely, Michigan needs one of those days. And as you peel back the years throughout the history of this series, the games in Columbus weather-wise are generally a stark contrast to the games in Ann Arbor. It's usually 55, 60 degrees in Columbus, and it's practically winter most of the games that are played in Michigan. So they, of course, want a good weather day or a bad weather day. And I think that the Ohio State running game continues to prove nothing. They need to be better to, I don't want to say secure a national championship, because I don't want to say that they're that much of an odds-on favorite, but I do believe that this is the best team in the country, but they need at least a decent running game to get it done.
Final thing, what can Bryce Underwood show you this Saturday at Wrigley that will tell you, all right, that was a step forward after the last couple of weeks?
If I can go through each play, drop back of Bryce Underwood, and 75 to 80% of the time feel as though he's making the right decision, the right choice, and placing the football, throwing it on time and placing it in a catchable area 75 to 80% of the time, then I'll feel good about his progress. Again, the Northwestern defense is no joke, but there are plays to be made just because Michigan is athletically better. And you do make a good play toward the wide receiver portion of this, and what you viewed a couple of weeks ago against Purdue in person, that with Andrew Marsh, and I don't know what's been going on with Donovan McCulley exactly, because I saw good things out of him earlier this season, his ability to make high-end plays, that maybe they do have something there if they can harness it and get their young quarterback to throw the ball in the vicinity of the receivers.
In other words, you want to see him execute an offense, not just like random acts of stuff.
I do think that he needs to be part of the running game, most likely against Ohio State. In
100% he's going to have to be. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. And which is probably why they're very hesitant to use him a ton in these, in a lot of the games leading up to that. So, yeah, I agree. All right, good stuff, Mark, as always, man. Thank you, brother. Good to see you. God bless.
Appreciate it, Steve. Thanks.
You bet. This week's X-Poll results, we asked you, did you find you needed a bye from Michigan football too? 73% of you said yes, frustrating watch. 27% of you said no, missed it. Yeah, I was a yes on that. I needed a break. I'm fired up to see it again. Going to be at Wrigley on Saturday, so looking forward to that. Never been there before, so kind of make the trek to the Shrine, and then also to see my beloved Maize and Blue. But yeah, I needed a break to appreciate it again. I mean, this can be a lot of the Sharon Moore era, frankly, has been a lot of frustrating watches thus far. And that brings us to our feedback of the week. Travis Brahman wants to know, would I be in favor of Michigan leaving the Big Ten over this private equity deal? And my answer is unequivocally yes. I mean, if you see Bud Elliott from 24/7 Sports say there, if you're threatening Michigan and USC with having their rights not tied to a bunch of schools who don't draw any ratings, that might not be the threat that you think it is. That's the Big Ten is saying that. We're going to do this without you. Okay. I mean, if we're not a league now, if we're just an investment portfolio now, okay. Well, why would you take your stake, your commodity, your IP, and link it to less things that will drag its overall value down into perpetuity? In any trading market, who would do that? No one would do that. So why should Michigan do that here? And to me, you just got flush with cash with a massive TV deal. And you need private equity already? That's like taking out a charge card to pay down a charge card. No, I mean, this is venture socialism. This is the stuff of the European Union. Britain and Germany just pay for the rest of the entire continent. So the rest of the league is Greece. Michigan, USC, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon just pay for everybody else. Hell to the no on that. Hell to the no on that. Fine, adding our value to enhance the overall league, subsidizing it is an entirely different thing. In one case, all right, you're still a meritocracy, but you're doing things responsibly as a rising tide that lifts all boats. In this case, you're being asked to co-sign a loan that the rest of the parties can't pay off, but they need you to co-sign it because you alone can. But you don't need the loan yourself. No, we're not doing that. So if it's link yourself to inferior portfolios, values, commodities, stakes into perpetuity or go independent, I'd go independent 100 times out of 100. That's what I would do. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, follow, 5-star review, comment, whether you're right here on YouTube or on iTunes or elsewhere. We appreciate each and every one of those. Thank you very much. Also, don't forget to join us in between episodes at Michigan Podcast on X as well. Until the next time, I'm Steve Deace. Go Blue.